Hello, everyone. Today it's just a short video about the internal family systems therapeutic modality and what that entails. And so, the internal family systems is a somatic therapy that was developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz, and it means that it has to do with the body. It means that we are using the body as a tool for healing. And so Dr. Richard Schwartz was actually a family therapist first, and he discovered that we all have an internal family, that he used the family systems therapy model on individuals, treating their internal family like an actual family. He realized that we all have these parts of us inside of us that have roles that we play, and that these roles are often immature or destructive or from younger parts of us that have been kind of playing those roles ever since we were kids because we needed to adapt to our environment in certain ways. And so our behaviors that we had back then, they're still showing up today as adults. And it's just because we have these little parts of us that are still kind of playing in those dysfunctional roles. And that once we discover that and separate from those parts, then we can begin to unburden them from those roles and integrate them into what he calls the self with a capital S. So the other main point of internal family systems is that we all have this self energy, this source of compassionate, unconditional love that exists within each of us. And this self energy spontaneously emerges once we separate from our parts, once we get some space from them, we actually just naturally, spontaneously connect with and feel this self energy. And so, this compassionate stance between that self and our parts is the healing process. This is the basis for IFS therapy. So we have certain roles that our parts will play. And so you see, we have our self there, and then we're made up of all these little parts that are not the self. And our parts fall into different roles. And so the three main roles we have: firefighter, manager, and exile. So the exile is like our wounded parts. They're like our little inner children, the parts of us that have been wounded in the past and still show up today as like kind of negative emotions in our life: fear, sadness, overwhelm, helplessness, things like that. And then we have the two protectors of that exile. We have two parts, different kinds of parts of us that will show up that basically just try to suppress and keep that exile down, submerged, where we can't feel those feelings because they're too painful. And our brain doesn't like to feel those feelings. And so we have these parts of us that will show up that were ways to protect us from feeling that exile's feelings. And so the firefighters and managers are both protectors, but one is a more proactive protector and one's a more reactive protector. So let's get into the parts a little bit more in detail. So we have our manager part, and the manager is a proactive protector. The job of the manager is to control our life so we don't have to feel the feelings of the exile, right? It kind of dominates our life and tries to keep everything steady and in control and doesn't like to have big feelings coming through from our past. And so managers, they basically help us focus on preventing the exile from getting triggered, right? From showing up in our lives, trying to control everything to make sure that we don't have a big feeling that kind of shows up. And so a manager part of us often looks like our people pleaser or caretaker or controller. Maybe we're a workaholic or a high achiever. We want to be good or follow the rules, or maybe we're a perfectionist. That's often how the managers show up. And sometimes they are more negative, maybe a rager or maybe an addiction or something too. But generally, manager parts will show up as parts of us that want to look good. And so they're trying to maintain a sense of calm and control over our lives, and really, in spite of whatever the feelings are, trying to keep that suppressed no matter what. And so even if you've seen the movie Inside Out, Joy, the part that part was a manager, right? She kept trying to suppress sadness and not feel sadness, and just keep everything looking really good. So that would be an example of a manager part. So now we've got our firefighter part. That's a reactive protector, right? So the job of the firefighter is to stop the pain of the exile no matter what. Just to, when the exile does break through the manager's control, then the firefighter comes in to try to just get that feeling suppressed or get as far away from it as we can as soon as we can, right? So they're reactive protectors, and they share the same goal as the managers. They want to suppress the vulnerable parts and extinguish that emotional pain however they can, right? They're like emergency response workers coming in with the big hose and just get that feeling away. And so they only get activated once the emotional pain does break through the control of the managers. And so the firefighters tend to be pretty fierce and use extreme measures that the managers don't like rage or addictions or abuse, promiscuity, violence, and even ultimately suicide is the part. Sometimes people have a part of them that wants to commit suicide because it's just trying to escape the emotional pain. That's really what it comes down to, is escaping the pain or getting away from or ending the pain however it can. And so their goal is to distract or stop the emotional pain as fast as possible without consideration of the consequences. And that's the firefighter part of us. So then we have our exiles, and the exile is our wounded part, and its job is to keep trying to push past those protectors so that it can be loved by the self, by that sense of unconditional love, whether it's in ourselves or if we feel it from others. That exile wants to keep pushing through to be seen, to be acknowledged, and to show us that we have a wound. And so it does keep trying to push past however it can. So it's an injured or wounded or traumatized part of us, usually pretty young, and meaning that the trauma occurred at a young age. And right, that part of us has been frozen in that moment of time ever since. So exiles are parts that have often been dismissed or shamed or neglected in childhood. And they're parts of you that we typically try to hide, right? Those parts of us, or suppress them or ignore them because of the emotional pain that they carry with them. So an exiled part will often get triggered by something in the present moment that reminds them of that past wound. And so it shows up as a big negative emotion like fear or sadness in that moment. Yeah. So we have these different roles, and in general, our manager tries to stay in charge. And for a long time, a lot of people do manage to keep their lives under control for the most part. They have a manager that tries to control things and control people and control their lives. But then eventually, the manager gets overwhelmed and exhausted. We cannot keep up that role of manager forever. It just doesn't work. Hence midlife crisis. We often find ourselves in this place as adults, with the parts of us that used to function and control things are just depleted and exhausted. We can't keep up the act. And so the exile keeps on breaking through. The exile keeps on getting triggered and busting through. And then the firefighter has to come in to try to extinguish the exile, and the manager is just done. So now we have just basically the exile and the firefighter in charge back and forth, and life becomes unmanageable. It's just too much, too many big emotions, too much negative behaviors, and too many consequences, and it becomes unmanageable. We can't keep going. And you see on the left, the parts, as long as all the parts are in control and taking over all the time, we don't have access to our self energy. And so basically we kind of eventually get tired enough or desperate enough to seek help to try to find some peace to this internal battle. And so the only way to really break that cycle is to separate from our parts and to allow our self energy to emerge, to have compassion and curiosity and love toward these parts of us. And we can find that through other people, and we can also find it even in our own body. Our own body has this self energy. Everybody does. Everyone has a self energy within them. Richard Schwartz describes the self as the you who is not a part. It's your inner source of unconditional love. And he said everybody has one. He never met a person who didn't have self energy that spontaneously emerged once we got enough space from the parts. And when this self energy emerges, there is these 8 C's that Dr. Schwartz has claimed that exist in every person. And when you feel this energy of one of these 8 C's, you know you are in your self energy: compassion, curiosity, calm, courage, confidence, creativity, clarity, and connectedness. These are our 8 C's. And so when we are experiencing this energy, we're in our self, right? We're in our adult self in the present moment, feeling safe and connected. And when we are not feeling any of these, if we're in any other feeling, desperation or helplessness or loneliness or anger or whatever, then we are in a part. That's it. We're just experiencing a part. And so the healing process takes place when we pause and we slow down and we get curious about our parts. And so just an example to help illustrate is when I was in high school as a teenager, I had an exile that was lonely, that was wanting to be loved. I had where in my home it was more emotionally avoidant. My parents were more emotionally avoidant. And so I longed to be seen and loved. And so that came out in a, a craving for food, for comfort through food as a source of comfort and love. And so my manager part of me didn't like that, eating too much food and gaining weight and not looking the way I wanted to look. And so the manager part of me kept trying to go on a diet or would try to write out all of the exact things I was going to eat every day. And I had this whole plan, and then I would constantly, my little exile would break through and have a craving and eat something I wasn't supposed to eat anyways. And then I would have this, the manager would kind of double down on the control using shame, using this kind of, you are bad and how could you do that? And oh, you're such a loser and you just can't stick with it. And this kind of self-betrayal, this feeling of just feeling so bad and shamed that it would shove that exile down again. And then I'd try again. Now, eventually, when that even the shame didn't work and I kept on busting through, that little exile kept busting through, then I had a firefighter come on in, and my firefighter was bulimia, and it would cause me to purge and throw up my food. And that was a way to escape the shame too of and the negative energy coming in from the manager, and also allow me to not feel so bad about myself because I was able to not have to hold the food that I had taken in. Now, obviously that's really unhealthy and it wasn't good for me, and that didn't last either. It got to the point where then I didn't even have the manager anymore. I was just binging and purging and binging and purging, and I didn't even have a part. My manager just got exhausted from all of it. And so my life became unmanageable. I couldn't continue like that. It was very destructive to my body, to my ability to perform and be happy in life. And, luckily I did have a really good friend who I finally confessed to. I finally was able to expose that part of me, the exiled part, the one that was feeling lonely and unloved. And I was seen, and I was seen in love. My friend showed me unconditional love. And I was able to, once that was exposed and put out into the light and under the light of love, then I was able to, with that support, find my own sense of compassion and bring that little part of me into love instead of being constantly in this battle of shame and suppression and that kind of thing. So I was able to find some self energy through someone else in my life. And that was really healing for me. And so that's one example of how our parts can be working in a system that that system will continue to spiral and get worse and eventually become unmanageable. And so even the unmanageability we can be grateful for. I'm grateful that it finally came to a point that was really dangerous, that finally was enough for me to acknowledge the wound, right? And that little wounded part, the exile won't go away. That's the thing. They don't go away. Our little parts of us, they're always going to be there. And so this is the beauty of our body, and always striving for balance and fighting for love, fighting to be seen, that it will continue to push through in some way. And so this is the basic concept of the internal family systems, is this integration of our parts into this unconditional love of ourself. And so if you want to know more about the process and how it works and how to do it, you can do it on your own. If you want to get the book No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz, he gives meditations and guidance and walks you through all the different roles and how to unburden these parts of you. And so you can do it on your own. That way, you can also seek an IFS therapist or coach to help guide you through this process. And that's my email. You can email me, reach out. I do also IFS coaching for people. And I also run a support group that is, so if you want to be kind of working it on your own, you can join a group of other people who are also working on this and working with their parts and discovering that. And you can get the benefit of the self energy of the group to help you as well. And I have my support group advertised on generationalhealing.org, and you can find that IFS support group there. So these are just some ways that you can continue on this journey of learning about yourself and your parts. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to working with anyone who would like to give it a try. All right, take care. Bye.